Hi, I'm ImageJ Watts, and I'm going to be talking about a new way to look at your favorite television show. In my case, it's Sherlock, and I'm going to be talking about the episode The Great Game, in particular, the scene that takes place before the opening credits. It looks like this. This is a montage view of that scene, and you can see it's blue, it's light. You can see Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock here. You can see that there are scenes that are closer up, there are scenes that are farther away, and this gives you a lot of information. Again, you can get a sense of the color, you can get a sense of how long each one of those shots are within the scene, and it's very handy. But there's one element that's missing here, and this one element that I have always been interested in and that I've missed throughout my studies in film theory and film studies. You can watch a TV show or film take place in time, unfold in time. You can hit the pause button and take notes about what shots you just saw. Um, various things from your recollection, from your memory. But it's very hard to have a clear mapping out of what's going on in front of you in 2 dimensions that appear to be 3 dimensions. So if you're lucky, you can have a view like this of all of the separate screen caps, but I'm using a tool called ImageJ to do a little bit more. And let me go into that and I'll explain what I'm up to. First, a metaphor. So what you're looking at here is different than the previous view I showed you, the montage video of all the screen caps, one right after the other, as if it were a film strip. I've taken that film strip and I've turned it into a book. So this page would be the first screen cap, and all the subsequent screen caps are laid one on top of each other in a stack, as if it's a book. Now, this book is special because it's got this image here. All the individual pages have coloring on them that, when put together, display this portrait of Abraham Lincoln. There's probably also some kind of display at the top because each one of those pages would have coloring along the very edge of the page and at the very top of the page. And that's the same thing with screen caps. So I'm getting ready to show you is that the side view of that stack of screen caps, one on top of another, tells a very compelling story. In this case, not about Abraham Lincoln, but it's still pretty cool. Again, there's the montage view. And this is a whole other way of looking at the scene. This is the book. That's the first page. What's invisible to you are all the pages behind it. When I hit play on this image, it's going to play just like you would have a regular movie. And that's great. Plays in time, you can see what's happening. But what's really special about this view is that it's created in a program called ImageJ, which is a medical imaging program. So I've been able to take the screen caps, turn them into a book, and rotated them to the side. So this is the equivalent of the foredge of that book that I previously showed you. This is the Abraham Lincoln view right here of that scene in The Great Game. And this is the top pages. This is as if we're looking at the book and there's an image at the top that sort of tells the story along with Abraham Lincoln. So this is the foredge, the Abraham Lincoln view, and this is the top. What's exciting about this? So what? Well, you'll notice that there are many striations, and you'll notice that they're of varying width and look, light, coloring, things like this. Each striation represents a shot of the overall scene. You'll notice that there are some striations that are pretty solid, where there's not a lot of movement in the coloring, and there are some that have some movement but that are pretty similar, like there's some movement right here. And then you'll see ones that look like they could be solid. There's a little bit of consistency there in this row, but there's a little bit of jaggedness. Then you'll see in this one it's completely still, And then in one that looks very much like it, there's this sort of black blob. And over here you'll see on the parallel, there it is. So these scenes look very similar, but there's a little bit of difference here. So let's take a look. I'm going to start by showing you what these first striations mean. Now you'll notice that there is that pitch black. We're looking at it here with the Minsk, Belarus subtitle. And you'll notice that black kind of changes here and you get a little bit of jagged blue. And then some white in that same shot. And that is because we're looking at a wipe shot into a dolly shot. Let me show you. There's the wipe. We're wiping in. And now we've got the full screen view. Watch what happens with the camera. And then into the second shot. What's happened is we've gone from a wipe. We're wiping the scene in. And the camera itself, along with the camera operator, are on a rig that are attached to a track that a crew member by the name of a dolly grip is pushing the rig along this track. So you get that smooth movement of the camera. And this is what's called a dolly shot. So it's a wipe into a dolly shot. And that's why you have this black with a little bit of that color coming through, the blues and the whites coming through, because you're moving on the same shot. The dolly's moving. Now watch what happens with the next shot. I've just let it play for a couple of seconds, but if you were to make a GIF out of this, an animation, it would be possibly the most boring GIF that you could imagine because nothing is happening. Sherlock and Berwick are almost completely still. And what's even more interesting is you notice those striations, they're completely consistent because the camera is not moving. And this is something that is sort of indicative of Paul McGuigan's style as a director. He really liked to have long, wide shots, master shots, where all of the action would play out in one scene with a wide view of it. And that mode of shooting can be economical. It can be great in terms of timing. You don't have to do multiple image setups. You don't have to change your lamps much. And it lets the actors, in this case, Benedict Cumberbatch, as the primary, as somebody who's got a theater background, lets them play the whole scene out without worrying about cutting it up into little bits for the camera. So that's what the master shot does. And McGuigan, even more than any other Sherlock director, uses those master shots or parts of those master shots throughout. And he's not afraid of a static camera. What this camera allows him to do is sort of have some symmetry in the image itself. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but it's really close. So you get a sense of symmetry between them with a little bit of weighting one side to the other and a completely still camera. That is paralleled in the stillness of those lines. So let's watch, let's keep going. Now we're going to get into a more traditional setup where we've got medium close-ups on Berwick, going back between him and Sherlock. And I want you to pay attention to the windows in these scenes. I don't mean scenes, in shots, and the windows in these shots. Did you catch it? If not, you'll catch it again. Now we're back to a closer view where we've brought the camera closer in, but it's still steady. So we've gone from a wide shot to a medium shot. That hasn't been done, which is sort of traditional, by having somebody push that camera in on a dolly into the scene. What has happened is we've had a static shot, and then we've brought the camera itself in so that it's closer, and it's still static. And now we're into this beautiful picture of Sherlock. And you're going to notice that there is some movement in the camera when it's on Sherlock in these scenes. You'll notice at the very tip, sometimes his head almost leaves the frame. And the camera operator, in this case it's Steve Laws, who's the director of photography for the episode, has to move the camera slightly to keep Sherlock's head in frame. But all in all, it's a much more steady camera than what happens when you get to Berwick. Berwick's camera is dynamic, and if you can't catch it at first sight, check the windows, watch the windows. See how it's moving up and down, the camera's moving up and down and left to right, both at the same time, and it gives you a sense of how agitated Berwick is. Meanwhile, when you flash back to Sherlock in those brief seconds, those few frames, still. And he's on a parallel. I just love this picture. You've got a little bit of bounce light on Benedict Cumberbatch's face. It makes him look positively Byronic. And a bit of an angle on Berwick. Steadier as he's challenging Sherlock. The shot is steadier. Then we're back to that medium shot, still camera. Again, he's trying to convince Sherlock, who's looking off camera and could really care less about his motives. And we notice Sherlock noticing because he moves his head and the camera is still. Very unusual. Back and forth quickly between them. You can see that there's some agitation building. And here those shots are becoming shorter and shorter. The widths are shorter and shorter, narrower. It's because we're moving back and forth between those shots very quickly. Now look at the windows here. As he's pounding on the table, the camera is moving with him. And again, Sherlock looks away. Stillness. Come back to Berwick. He's trying to catch himself. So the camera is a little stiller. Still moving, but a little stiller than when he's pounding. And back to that wide shot. That still wide shot. Now take a look down here. You can see there's no movement in these lines except for there's this black jaggedy blob. So this indicates to me that there is a still camera. The camera's not moving. Something within the camera, or within the camera's purview, something in the shot itself is moving. Let's take a look. And there we go. You'll see that it turns black. That is because we're looking at the top view of, and to the side view of, Sherlock's famous Belstaff coat. It's Sherlock who's moving within the frame. The camera itself is still. And you'll notice here that it's very still. There's a little bit of movement, but hardly any until the end. Look at what happens as the frame advances. Sherlock is still. He's still. And then he turns to Berwick, and we get the jagged move. We're going to get another cut. And get this great color that you see here, the light that's hanging over the Belarus flag, and that wonderful shot up at Sherlock. And hanged is how he ends it. Yes, he corrects the grammar. And then walks off. We've got the camera static, and we've got Sherlock leaving the frame, which ends the scene. And then it fades to black, just as it faded in. And then we go to the titles. So this is how you can use ImageJ to check out your YZ axis and your XZ axis views of your screen cap stacks. You can notice the camera movement. You've got finally the ability to have a very quick overview, a diagram that's ready at a glance to tell you how many shots there are in a scene, what the coloring is like, what the lighting is like, how bright or dark it is, whether the camera is moving at all, and how fast the camera is moving and to what extent. And if you're very careful, you can tell with some experience that this is a dolly shot moving in as opposed to handheld, where the cameraman's keeping everybody in frame but giving the shot a little bit of dynamism. So thank you for watching.